Hey everybody, welcome to FF Uncensored. Trevor has rainbows today. He's very proud of this.
I love these backgrounds. Well, welcome. Today we are talking about the time I did that thing.
That thing.
That thing.
That diet thing.
That diet thing. So, who wants to start?
Okay, so why don't we start with the diet that you're going to share, and maybe we do a couple of these because I'm sure we both have tried more than one. What diet, why you tried it, what you liked, and what you didn't like.
All right. So, there was this time when I decided to be a vegan, and it lasted about a week. So, for those of you that aren't familiar, like vegan is like no animal products whatsoever. Whatsoever. So that's different than like a vegetarian, where a vegetarian will sometimes, like, you have lacto-ovo vegetarians, which do milk and yogurt, or yogurt and eggs, right? And so there's like all these different variations. But I'm like, vegan is the strictest of them all. And so I was like, all right, we're going to go that route. So I did a little bit of research about what to eat, right? Because it is a different eating style. And then I just went to it. And it was an interesting experience, but I stopped it after about a week because I just wasn't able to consume enough food to maintain weight. And so this wasn't a time in my life when I wanted to actually like lose a lot of weight. And so when you move to a vegan, most of the food was raw. And so I was eating like massive bowls of like salads and fruits. And like, I can't say I was probably the most prepared for it. Like, I probably should have been doing a lot more like legumes and that kind of stuff. But I was basically just eating a lot of plants. And newsflash, plants.
How old were you?
I was doing functional fitness at the time, I believe. So like probably in like mid 20s. And it was more just like an experiment. I think I read someone and they kind of convinced me to try it. It's like, give it a go. But yeah, so I didn't, I think if I were to do it again, I could do it differently. I just have more skills now than I did at that point. But I was basically just using big bowls of fruit and leafy greens and all of that kind of stuff.
And hoping you got enough food.
Right. Yeah. Newsflash. I was getting enough food, but not enough food if from a caloric standpoint, because like newsflash, fruits and vegetables actually aren't that calorically dense for someone that is very active, ectomorphic body type, burns a lot of calories. Right. And so, yeah, it was, and I just like, I wasn't all that, like, didn't have all that much energy. Like, it just wasn't a good experience. And this isn't a knock on people that are vegans. Like, cool, do your thing. Not for me. And so, like, if you do go into these weird realms of like very specific dietary things, there's a fair amount of prep that needs to go into it from a knowledge standpoint and a skill standpoint. And probably if I was going to do something like this again, I would get a coach, or probably get a coach, because that's the easiest, fastest way to do. Like, you could get a book and try and follow the book, but a coach allows you to like take the knowledge and apply it to your specific situation. And if you're completely inexperienced in this, like, you're just not going to probably be very successful with it, because it's just, there's too many moving parts. So that was the time I tried to be a vegan, and it didn't turn out so hot.
I think it's really funny. So I did have a period where I thought I was going to be a vegetarian. I don't even think I lasted that long. This was at a point in my life where I didn't do that. But I will go with like one of the first diets I would say I ever did. I was probably 24, 23, and I started doing CrossFit. Trevor, what diet did I do?
Paleo.
I went paleo. Okay, so if you guys aren't familiar with paleo, it's basically you cut out all processed food.
Well, do we want to talk about like what paleo actually is?
Well, like what
or the interpretation of paleo across different communities?
Okay. So anyways, all processed foods, no grains, no.
That's probably the biggest differentiator, is the no grains thing. Like, that's kind of what most people think of paleo, right? And that's the decide. Everything else like whole foods process or whole foods, but like the no grains. That's the big
The
one.
no grains. So no grains. So that was the biggest one.
Or
So I want
legumes.
to yes. So no beans and that kind of stuff. So like and no peanut butter because peanuts are a legume, not a nut for
Delicious
anyone.
though.
Delicious,
Absolutely
agreed.
delicious.
So it was really like very traumatizing for the girl who ate like toast for breakfast and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch and pasta for dinner. It was super, super hard. I never ate a sweet potato until I went and did
So you went like
paleo.
hardcore paleo. Like you went like no potato paleo too? Because like sweet
No, I did
potatoes are kind of
potatoes.
like one of those. Oh, okay.
Yes. So, but I had never eaten a sweet potato in my life. And this was where I was like trying to get carbs because I'm like, well, crap, I cut all of them out. What do I do? I did sweet potatoes and white potatoes, which is like way more argumentative is a
Mm.
white potato count. I'm like, it's a
Yeah.
root
Oh,
vegetable.
yeah. Let's
It's a
not.
root.
Ooh.
So yeah, I
White
know. It's
potatoes, white foods, bad. Not eating
yeah.
them.
So anyways, I did it for a very long time. I did super competitive CrossFit. I would probably tell you I felt really good, but I couldn't get stronger because I probably wasn't eating enough carbs
I
because
would be curious to see how you felt if you had adequate carbohydrate intake. Because my guess is you weren't keto, like you weren't
yeah,
that low, but you were probably in like probably the less than 100 for sure, maybe 50 grams of carbs a day.
I was probably a little bit higher than that. But still not high enough where you probably to compete and be really competitive and have the energy levels, we're talking about probably like 200 grams of carbs. Like just so you guys understand, like we're talking about double the amount of food that I was eating to probably closer to where I needed to be for activity levels. And that's probably like the biggest thing for like, diets. Like you talked about like how you felt and how you were losing weight. And a lot of it is you do a diet and you cut out so much food that doesn't make it sustainable for a long period of time because you're not hitting where you calorically needed to be. When I was doing paleo, I probably didn't have enough carbs, but I was eating a lot of like almonds and cashews and stuff like that because I could have them and they're super high calorie. So I was actually probably still over consuming. Was something beeping in your background? The gym timer. Okay,
The
cool.
old
I'm
mic,
just
no, the old, oh, look at me, thumbs up. The old microwavy going on
okay.
back
I
there.
just was like, oh my god, did something just start beeping in my house? Um, it won't do it again. So like when you're doing a diet, it's not always this eat less. Less is more. Like eating less doesn't always give you better or more results.
Unless you're eating too much.
Yes,
So
unless you're
it's
eating too much.
there's some caveats there, right? If someone isn't losing weight, it's because they are consuming more calories than they are burning, right? Thermodynamics. Yes, there are a
Yep.
lot of things that influence that, right? And so hormones, all of those things play into it. They don't,
But hands down, if you are not in a calorie deficit, you will not lose
right?
weight. Like there's
But
no
right.
magic there.
And so like things are easier when everything is in alignment. If my hormonal panels are good, if I'm kind of getting adequate sleep at night, all of those things make it easier to then hit the numbers. If those things aren't in check, right, it makes it really hard to actually hit those numbers because your internal processes are going to drive you to eat because it's a source of energy. And if I'm not sleeping at night, like there's ways to do it. You're going to crave other things. Like that's just part of the body's mechanisms for staying alive, right? And so everything is easier when everything is in alignment or at optimal levels. So all things being equal, right, we need to be consuming less. And that's one of the reasons why we talk about whole foods. Because you could technically lose a ton of weight on processed foods. Like you can, but you're
Mhm.
just not going to get very much food. Like from a volume standpoint, like you're going to get a very little. You've probably seen pictures around on the internet that show like, let's call it 2,000 calories of foods. So here's what 2,000 calorie of food looks like in broccoli and rice and chicken breast and those kind of things. And it looks actually like a lot of food.
Mhm.
And then we say, here's 2,000 calories of food at a fast food joint. And you see like a Big Mac and fries, right? And so the volume is different. And which is one of the reasons why we talk so much about whole foods, because it gives you volume. You actually get a volume in your stomach. And we have these receptors in our stomach that respond to stretch. So when our stomach stretches, right, it's feeling like it's full. And we can kind of trick our brain into thinking that we've had more food than maybe we actually have because it's a volume. There's fiber, there's water, there's all these other
Yep.
things that come with it. So
Well, and then it has to break it down and process all that, even at a volume standpoint, which hyper palatable foods like McDonald's, it's broken down, all of that kind of stuff. Like you're going to digest those faster because they're already broken down more than when you start eating them. Like breaking down an apple is a lot harder than breaking down a French fry.
right, right.
They've already broken down a lot of the parts of the fry to be able to do it. So like there's a huge benefit to it. And it's kind of why like when we talk about like making nutrition changes for people or we talk about anything else, we almost always err to the right side of we don't talk about taking stuff away and doing all of that stuff. There can be benefits to removing stuff from your diet, but like most of the time we're like, add a vegetable to this meal, add a fruit here, try and get this. We're talking about adding more whole foods to your diet, not always removing.
Because I mean, there's a psychological component to it, right?
Well, yeah.
Like it's more painful to remove something than to add something in. So the goal is like to crowd out some of that other stuff. Like if we can continue to add new stuff in, it's going to help crowd out, as long as we say, hey, do this first. And if you do this and you check in with yourself and you still need more, okay, then go do the other thing. But you'll find out that by adding things in, you're like getting to the fullness levels that you need. You're feeling satiated and satisfied. Yeah, those things may sound good, but you don't actually need them. And we all kind of get to that state, right? We're like, I like that, but I don't actually need it right now because like I'm pretty good. And so at that point, and then you make a decision. And so that allows you to kind of take back control versus feeling like maybe food is controlling you. Like, oh, I got to have that if I like, blah, 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 right?
If you were going to tell someone to start a diet right now, if someone came to you and say they would, I would take that back. To tell someone to start a diet, I'm changing my question. If someone came to you and said they were going to start a diet today, what advice would you give them?
Well, one is I think know what you're getting into, and like, and I'm all about experimentation, right? Like I'm all about trying things. So I think like, hey, if you want to try keto, great. Just make sure that you understand what you're getting into, and there are certain things that you can do in order to make it a more enjoyable experience. If you just decide, if you wake up one morning and decide that you're going to go keto, you're going to hate it, right? Because you're going to drop all carbs. You might see some weight loss right away, but you're going to feel like crap. You might get the keto flu type of stuff because your electrolytes just have tanked and like you're just not doing. But if we can introduce you to some electrolyte supplements, if we can throw maybe some MCT oil in there and other things to help get to it, maybe some exogenous ketones to help kind of get ketone levels up quicker rather than being in this like no ketones to getting ketones in your blood, which is typically like a really crappy period of time. Mm-hmm. Like there's other ways to make it better. And so it's like, do your homework, do your research, plan and prep things as much as you can, like especially when we're doing something drastically different than what we're currently doing, and then treating it like an experiment. So some things should be like, I need to be able to commit to this for a period of time. I like 2 weeks. I think that's a good enough period of time for you to get a good understanding of, did this work for me or is it working for me? And then we check in with all the other things. Is this sustainable for me? Is probably the next piece. Because there's nothing wrong with using a very specific protocol to get a very specific result in a short period of time. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever, right? Because if I'm maybe fairly lean and I want to get extra lean for something, maybe drop 4 or 5 pounds quickly to get ready for something, like there are protocols to make this happen, but I'm not going into it thinking that the thing I'm doing is the thing I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And so I'm going into it thinking, all right, this is going to be a grind. I'm going to do this for a specific result because I want this thing. And this thing that I want is maybe more important to me than my general happiness for a period of time. Because I'm like, might be a grumpy person for the next 2 weeks because I'm going on a hardcore diet. Ask any bodybuilder that's in their final stages of prep. They're probably not happy people to be around because their calories are dropped so low. They're prepping for this specific thing, but that's not how they live their lives all the time. It's for specific results.
Well, and I think that's a very interesting one to go with because you're talking about people who people see pictures of and they're like, man, I want to be that lean. I want to get there. And like, there's a lot of things that you forfeit for the moment that you step on that stage. And I don't think that
most people aren't willing to sacrifice the things that it's necessary in order to get to that.
And that's not how they work. Well, and that's not how where they live most of their life all the other times of the year. We're talking about a season where they prep for a show. And it takes years to get to that point too. Like good, like you can prep and do a show in 16 weeks or whatever, but the people who do that and that's what they enjoy and how they compete and all of that kind of stuff, they've trained for years to get to the point where they're at. So like know that all good things take time, but that doesn't put you in a permanent diet or a permanent caloric deficit because you don't really want to be in a caloric deficit all of the time.
Right.
Like if your goal is weight loss, you want to get to caloric deficit, lose some weight. I set numbers with clients when I'm doing like macro counting and stuff like that with them. Like, okay, you've been in a deficit, you've lost X amount of weight. We're going to get to some maintenance calories and we're going to maintain for a few weeks because that is also really like a really great place for your body to be. If you lose 10 pounds and you haven't laid 10 pounds less in 10 years, like figure out what it's like to maintain at 10 pounds less, how many calories you can consume, what you can do, what your capabilities are, and then you can start decreasing again. It doesn't have to be this constant downslide to get there. Like there is a plateau can be a really good thing when you're trying to make adjustments to your life.
So that brings to mind a quote that I think is relevant in this situation where comparison is really the thief of joy. And so you don't know that other person's daily activities. You don't know that other person's genetic profile. You don't know the other things that might be going on. So once you start comparing to something else, like you're just stealing away your own joy. And so trying to compare yourself to yourself 5 years ago or yourself 6 months ago or yourself three months ago, how are my behaviors different? And let's not kid ourselves. Are the behaviors that I currently have consistently actually leading to the result that I want? Or is it just I want that result, but I'm not necessarily worrying. I'm not necessarily changing the behaviors that it takes to actually get that result. And so I think those two things can be challenging too when I expect something different, right? But I'm not actually doing the things to get the thing that I'm expecting. A lot of frustration can happen, right? And so I think being honest with ourselves on where we're at and where we want to go and what are we willing to give up, because everything in life is a trade-off. Right? Everything in life is a trade-off. You can't do it all. You have to give up something in order to get something else. So is it important or not? I think a lot of people, where most people are at in their life, if they just worry about trying to get healthy and what does that look like, they are probably going to make progress in the way that they want to go. That means they're getting regular movement in. That means they're sleeping consistently at night. It means that they are probably giving an F about their nutrition, right? Like they maybe not following a specific protocol or something like that, but they're like, call it conscious nutrition. I'm actually thinking about what I'm eating, and I'm not eating like a 8-year-old, right? Which is like
Yep.
seafood, eat food, or in our family's case, pizza and mac and cheese, or pizza and spaghetti, right? And so eat like an adult, and you're probably going to be okay. Like you're probably going to get relatively close. And then if you want that next level, that may take specific strategies. But the vast majority of people can get where they want to get to and get to a good state by just being more consistent with being healthy.
I think that's a good place to leave it today.
So I'm all about experimentation. I think you learn a lot when you try things, because when you do try paleo or you do try keto or you do try vegan or what, like you're going to have to just develop new skills that then help you in other areas too. You maybe try some new recipes. You may like, you just do things and it's fun and it keeps you engaged. And so like, I'm all about, I don't want this to come across like you shouldn't experiment. I think that's great, but I think putting time frames on it and then checking in with yourself and being like, hey, can I do this for the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? No? Cool. Great experiment. Learn some things. Take the good things that you took out of it, right? And then get rid of the rest. So
I like that. It is just a test, trial and error. Find out what works. Do it if it works. If it doesn't work, change it, but stick with it long enough to find out if it changes.
right.
So,
And I like 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks is a good enough time frame to see if things are moving in the right direction. And then I think it's good to just have a few parameters that we're checking in on. You know, if it's more of a health thing, then it's like, what are my energy levels like? You know, give your energies a rating on a scale of 1 to 10, right? How am I sleeping? Scale of 1 to 10. Where am I at? Right? If there are other things like hunger or cravings or other things you're trying to work on, like give yourself that. If it's weight loss orientated, do a body comp, do a waist measurement, like things that actually apply to that. Doing a scale weight can be okay, but it can be manipulated and move around a lot. So I like scale weight as one of them, but not the
The
only
only
one.
one. Yep.
Right. So hopefully that's helpful. Maybe it's not, but
Well, you guys enjoy. Till next time.